Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show where we talk about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. My name is Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I welcome you to join me as I talk to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation on the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page or access additional VIP content as a premium subscriber via Patreon. For just a couple of dollars a month, you can get an early access to episodes, additional bonus content, and your chance to connect with my guests. To do so, simply visit patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. Let's talk near death.
I was looking down and I was above where my body was on the bed, and the only senses I had was that I could see. And as I was there, I didn't have any sense of anything that I knew on this earth.
Hello. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, host of your show, and I'm very, very excited today to be doing this interview live through our VIP page. If you're listening to the replay and you want to know how to get the live version of these interviews, just check out patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury, where I'm going to be doing quite a few videos live going forward from now. So it is wonderful to be here. I'm very excited to see how all of this goes. I'm a little bit new to this, but it's going to be great. And today I've got an incredible guest. I have got Krista Gorman with us. And Krista, you had a near-death experience when you had a pulmonary arrest when you were in labour with your first child. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So you were dead for 8 minutes.
Yes, I was.
That's a really long time. So first of all, Krista, I want to welcome you to the show. Say thank you for being here. Do you want to start right back at the beginning? Tell us, how did this all happen? How did your near-death experience take place?
Well, I was pregnant with my daughter and I was induced into labor. And with an induction, sometimes there can be a risk of having to have a C-section because the induction doesn't proceed as quickly as we'd like it to in the healthcare field. I'm a physician assistant and practicing medicine in Florida. And I knew when my daughter's heart rate was dropping, with every contraction that I had, her heart rate would drop dangerously low. And I knew that all it took was one time really for that to happen, for my physician to then say, we need to do a C-section. So that started to happen, all that they started to get me ready for a C-section. And one of those pieces of getting me ready was putting in what's called an internal monitor on my daughter's scalp. And when they did that, they actually have to, it's a corkscrew. It sounds very barbaric, and it
really does.
Yeah. And it's a corkscrew, and they can actually monitor her heart rate and her vital signs with it. So when they did that, she had a reflex, and this is what the theory is. She had a reflex, and she literally like kicked amniotic fluid into my bloodstream. She kicked so hard. Well, my body saw it as foreign and started to attack it and created clots, basically, millions of them. And the blood traveled to my lungs and blocked off my lung vasculature, which then created I started having trouble breathing. This all happened so rapidly, within seconds, split seconds even. It was happened so quickly. And they immediately, just the nurses were amazing. They immediately started to move me out of the room, had called a code blue. And as I was in the hallway going into the operating room where they were going to do the emergency C-section, I remember I was gasping for air. And it felt like I was trying to suck air through a tiny little straw. And I just couldn't get any more into my lungs. And that's when I started to fade away. And just before I started to fade away, I just felt this divine grace, peace just kind of came over me from behind, and I was gone. And then the next moment of my awareness was of I was looking down, and I was above where my body was on the bed, and the only senses I had was that I could see. And I watched as these black particles came racing up from the middle of my body here in my head. And they came up and formed this sort of static cloud where my vision was. And as I was there, I didn't have any sense of anything that I knew on this earth. I was still Krista. I was still my consciousness, but I had no memory of anything. I didn't know I was human. I didn't know what human was. There was none of that. I was simply observing this scene below me. And I sort of looked around. I saw that the particles just sort of undulating there. And I looked around and I saw that the wall was sort of fluid, and there was a wallpaper sort of line across the top of the wall, meeting the ceiling. And that was flowing. And I looked back down again, and I saw another doctor come into the room, and he stepped up to the bed, and my doctor there, I had seen my doctor deliver my daughter and hand her to somebody here. I floated around the room, and as I floated around the room, I was becoming more and more curious about what was going on. And everything was feeling. There was no thinking involved in any of my NDE. It was all feeling. And I felt like I wanted to know more. I wanted to find out what was going on. And as that feeling grew, I felt something tug me on my left. And I sort of resisted, like I wanted to choose. I was staying. I wanted to find out more about what was happening. And I felt like I was getting there. It was like the tip of the tongue phenomena. You know, you know something, but you know a little word, but you just can't grasp it. You know, it was like that feeling, and just wanting to know. And it pulled the second time, and it pulled me harder. And I just sort of just let go. I just said, okay. I intuitively knew that it was for a reason. Like, okay, this means something. Is all I can say in human words to describe it. And then once I released that desire to stay, I started moving very, very, very quickly out of the room and through the wall and into this bright white flash, like white space, and then right through there into this dense, dark particulate matter that I was. And I was just moving imperceptibly fast. And I didn't even know that I was moving, if that makes any sense. But yeah. I remember looking and seeing that there were these dense particles, and then at times next to me, that it would be like a little bit of fluid, sort of like an oil painting mixed like with white, gray, and black, sort of mixed together. And then it would be dense darkness again. And then all of a sudden I stopped, and I had this download, and it was all in. And in that download, I just learned everything, all the answers to all the questions I'd ever had. And everything boiled down to love, no matter what the question. It boiled down to love. And it sort of went like in a funnel to a point. And I was like, and then I was just permeated with it, with this divine, profound, unspeakable love, unconditional. And I just felt this like bliss, ecstatic bliss. And I looked over to my right, and in the distance, there was this white speck, and it was as if it were drawing me to it, and I wanted to go. So I started moving towards that. And as I got closer, it got wider until I could see in the opening, there were these shadow beings, and they were sort of gray humanoid figures. And in the front, there was a little boy, and the little boy needed my help. And there were adults behind him. And I wanted to help the little boy. And they were just sort of there, these adults. So I went into the opening, and they all the adults sort of fanned out and kind of made space for me to come in. And it was sort of like a cloudy, whitish space. And they were all sort of a darker gray. And I got into sort of like the middle of the room, and I looked around, and I didn't see the little boy anymore. And I wondered where he went. And then I felt that they all needed my help. And I felt back, yes, I want to help you, of course. And then they started to come at me one by one and just dart at me and dart away very, very fast. And I was sort of just looking, and then I felt myself depleting there. I felt my energy diminishing. And I felt, I don't want to go away. I don't want to leave. I want to get out of here. And I was taken away out of that space, and I was back into the particulate matter. And then very, very quickly, I came through another opening, which was much larger than the other one. And I merged out of it into this beautiful landscape. And there were yellow flowers in front of me, and a rock-colored waterfall with moss on it. And then a evergreen forest this way. And then further out beyond the flowers of these green rolling hills. It was just like a paradise. I call it my Eden, because the feeling there was this eternalness of it. And I felt this love. It was all encompassing. I was the flowers. I could feel the flowers. I could feel their love. And it was just beyond words, beautiful. And then I was flanked on both sides by these, my spirit guides, I call them. And it was my understanding that they were what we call angels. And they were there to support me, unconditionally, lovingly supporting me, the strong support and loving strong support. And they communicated, again, everything was through feeling. They communicated I could stay there. I could go to what lay beyond there, or I could go back. And I didn't know what lay beyond this place. I didn't know where I'd come from. I had no recall that I had been a human being on Earth. There was none of that. And I chose to come back. And at the time, I didn't know why I was choosing that. I had no knowledge of what going back would be, no understanding of it. But that's what I chose. And they, of course, allowed me to do that. And I started moving backward very quickly. And as I did that, they sort of turned and communicated, if you go back, you need to share here. And I communicated back, okay. And then the next thing I knew, I was having this terrible pain in my chest. And I remember moaning because of the pain. And then almost, right away, it was gone. They must have given me some medication or something. What had happened was I had an amniotic fluid embolism, which is the amniotic fluid that got into my bloodstream, formed clots, and blocked off my lung vasculature, which caused me to be unable to breathe. My lungs couldn't exchange oxygen in the blood because they weren't getting any blood. Then my heart stopped. And again, this was within about 5 seconds, 10 seconds that this all happened. And after that, I started to bleed uncontrollably. So they had done the C-section. They were in the process of doing the C-section. They had initially started some compressions and then had to stop those because I was bleeding uncontrollably, which happens after an amniotic fluid embolism. Your blood can't clot. So they stopped compressions for 2 minutes and then restarted them once they got the bleeding under better control, and moved me to the ICU and had intubated me, and induced a medical coma, which is basically they're putting you to sleep, so that you don't fight the tube. You don't fight in general, which is what patients like to do. And I stayed there in the ICU through that day. That happened about 9:30 in the morning. I stayed in the ICU. The next day, I started to show some signs that I was still there. So they had lost my pulse for 8 minutes.
Wow.
And about 2 minutes of that, they weren't doing any CPR. So there were no life-saving measures being done at all. I just sort of laid there and let them, deliver Maggie and then try to get this bleeding under control. And And when I was in the ICU, they would, I was seen by a neurologist. They were doing all this testing, and they weren't really sure if I was going to recover. They prepped my family for the worst case scenario, which is that I would need 24-hour care the rest of my life.
Wow.
And they took my daughter directly to a local hospital, because the hospital I was at didn't have a neonatal ICU, and this other one did. So they transported her to a different hospital. And when I started to come around, my vital signs were stabilized. Withdraw the medication that was keeping me asleep, and I started to show signs that I was there. So they just continued, and they were able to extubate me, meaning take the tube out, about 36 hours after I had the event, which was pretty impressive, according to my doctors.
Okay.
They kept me in the ICU another day, and then I was really coming around very quickly. I was starting to show that I had some memories there. I remembered that I was a PA. I just graduated from my PA program 3 weeks before this. And
Wow.
I was set up for to start a job. And yeah, I had said, I'm a physician assistant and I'm going to be working for this doctor. I announced it to one of the nurses, and she put it in quotes in my chart, because she was so amazed. But I did move out of there after about 48 hours. And then I went into a private room and I stayed there, and they just monitored me, and the doctors came in and talked to me about what had happened. And my response was, I felt, what's the big deal? I'm okay now. Like,
Oh,
what are you
interesting.
so worried about? I don't understand what you're worried about. And I truly had I had no fear. I had no worries. I had no concerns about what had happened. There was, and some say it could be the brain injury, but for
Mhm.
me, I was blissed out. I was not on any medications, but I had this feeling of such joy, such peace, such, like, everything was perfect and well, and no matter what. And
This. I love this so much, Krista, because this is very similar to what I experienced. So
yeah,
I had my near-death experience through brain surgery, emergency brain surgery. And I remember so clearly when I woke up and I'm in the critical care unit and I've got
mm,
tubes everywhere and it's not looking pretty good. And I was just saying, everything is exactly right. Everything is perfect. And yeah, I'm just loving hearing your story because you had exactly the same thing. And
yeah,
any fear at that time?
none, zero.
No,
I had
isn't it interesting?
no fear. Oh, and I was type A before that. I wanted to be the best PA in the world. That's like,
Yeah.
I wanted to be the best PA. And that was to serve my patients, because I wanted to have all the knowledge that I could possibly have in order to serve them. And the thing was
Yeah.
I had no recall of PA school. I had no recall of my training when I first came around. And so that of course came back, but I also didn't want to be a PA anymore. I didn't have a desire to be a PA.
Interesting.
I had lost it. I was a different person. I was a
Mm.
different person. And my family didn't know what to make of me. They were just glad I was back, and that I was looking, on the outside, I looked fine. Inwardly, I was totally blissed, like walking around my condo, with my husband was there, um, and our daughter, and I would just intuitively take care of Maggie. Um, I didn't worry, like a first mom. I had no worries at all. And that lasted for a while. And at that time, I didn't have any direct recall of my experience. It didn't come to me until about roughly 3 weeks later or so. It was that summer. And it came to me in sleep. Had this incredible recall of this hyper real experience. Um,
Mhm.
and I woke up in the morning and I was like, oh my God, like everything makes sense now. Like, see why I'm so happy all the time and all you people aren't.
Yeah.
It just perfect sense to me. And I realized that, with me not having a desire to be a PA anymore, not having that connection to my profession, I had something else I was here to do as well. And in that recall, and that deep connection to that love, that divine love that we are, I knew that's what I wanted. I had to find a way to share that with the world. That's why I came back. My angels sort of gave me the challenge to do. And it took a long time for me to get from there to actually processing all of that in my life, within my life, living my life, until I got to the point where I could find a way to really start to share that divine love with others. Because during all those years, I had to first learn how to love myself. And then, only then, could I truly, purely, in the way that I had told my God I would, share that love with others and help others to cultivate it within themselves in their lives, which is why we're here. So.
Wow. Thank you so much, Krista. That is just such a, I don't know, I've got so many thoughts going through my head. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Welcome.
I'd love to backtrack a little bit back to your experience, because it seems like you went through some different stages. I don't know if that's the right word, different parts of your experience that were quite clearly, would you say stages? When you were at the part where people are flitting in, flitting out, when you saw the boy, when you're traveling.
Yeah.
To
be honest,
a lot of,
I don't really know how to categorize it. And I've been told by other people that, like Lee Whitting, I don't know if you're familiar with Lee.
Yeah.
But he had done an interview with me, and I had actually sat with him at a conference, and a bunch of people, we all had dinner together. But he said, your experience is quite unusual. And he said, it doesn't really fit, like the general mold. And I feel, and it's my understanding, and I always say this, I always kind of, have this caveat when I do talk really about almost anything. I try to remember to say this, that this is my experience, and it was created by me and for me. So I was in cahoots with the universe, with what I at one time thought of and understood to be God. I had created this experience for me so that I could learn how to be in this body on this earth at this time and get my work done, get done what I came here to do. The shadow beings represented everyone I'd ever tried to help, everyone I'd encountered that needed my help. They challenged me. That was a sort of me checking in and saying, okay, where are you with regard to caring for yourself first, and then helping others, and also that unconditional love, that detached love that we as people, of helpers of other people, need to have in order not to absorb everything that's all their energy. It's not about having sympathy or practicing sympathy. It's about being empathetic, that observational, detached, loving detachment in service of others. So in that realm with the shadow beings, that's where I was checking in. I chose me, and yay. I was ready.
Yay.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So do you think at any point you were off track in your life for this experience to have happened?
Personally, I don't feel that I was necessarily, because I did understand that that necessity to be empathetic versus sympathetic.
Right.
Because I had gotten my degree in psychology, I'd worked in mental health. I just wanted to be of service to people in my job, in what I did, for a living. So I worked in mental health, and for many years, I didn't know really how to navigate myself in those roles with others. And I did absorb a lot of people's energy. And I would get very involved with the people that I was helping in terms of wanting to make them better. And what I learned was that over the years of sort of growing up, I was in my early 20s when I first started, is that no one can make anyone better. No one can make anyone anything. And that's just a little piece of the learning that goes along with that. But no, I did not feel that I was in a place where I was, going through any heavy questioning spiritually. I was feeling real good. I was very science oriented at that point, although I did have an understanding of a power greater than me, of some sort, and I turned to nature for that. But my Catholic upbringing I didn't have any baggage from that. I was just sort of hanging out, and this happened.
Right.
Yeah.
And so today you're actually a nurse, aren't you?
I'm a physician assistant.
So you did full circle to come back to doing what you just finished, then this all happened. And
yes.
Yeah.
I've been working for almost 20 years as a PA.
Okay. So that's amazing, because that was the question that I had. If that was the track that you were on, and then you had this experience, and then you said it was all about transitioning to help the world, help people, and connect on that bigger level.
Mm-hmm.
And then I knew the inside knowledge that you were in the medical field now. So I think it's amazing how it has come full circle. But I can imagine the huge learning curve and the change that went throughout that process as well. So that's really great. So during your experience, were you aware? You said at one point that you had no recollection of your body. You weren't connected to life on Earth, and that it wasn't even on your thought pattern. It wasn't even your mind. Were you aware that you were dead, or were you just in the moment?
Yeah, I had no concept of death. I just was. And again, it was, for me, it was all about feeling and also intention. And what I later learned many years later is basically the law of attraction. My power in that realm was infinite. Whatever I intended, whatever I wanted, it happened. And I had the support of the universe to help that come to be. And that's how powerful we can be with when we're in a place of no resistance. In the afterlife, for me, there was no resistance at all. Resistance didn't exist. There's no word for it. There's no word for anything, really. But there, it wasn't a concept, an idea, or anything. It wasn't a feeling I had. There was zero resistance. So things happened just like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about with your body? Did you have any? You must have had some side effects from going through this experience physically.
Yeah. My body, it took me a while to recover physically from it. But I have some issues with memory. It's more like if I'm under stress, like if I got a lot going on, and it's this way for so many of us. But I forget, but I forget things that are, like, I would say I'm very hard on myself still sometimes, but things that should be so easy to remember. So I write things down when I'm seeing patients and I'm going through things with them. I write everything down just to be sure, but I do find that I'm very intuitive. My intuitive knowledge of what's going on medically with my patients is really right on. And I can go to their exact spot of pain that they're having. Oh, my low back hurts. Is it here? Yes, you hit it.
Wow.
Things like that. And I've learned to just simply go with my intuition, whatever I feel, and I don't question it. And that's what all of us can do. I don't contain or have anything from my NDE that other people don't have as well. But I feel like the NDE helped to bring it out in me, perhaps faster or to a greater degree than someone else. But if that someone else cultivated those gifts within themselves, they would have it too. You know.
So for someone who might be listening and thinking, okay, I want to tap into more of these gifts, these things that are available to me, what would you say to that? How do they start to do that? Is it simply a matter of spending more time in meditation or reflection, or what can they do to start to build that practice into their life without having the near-death experience?
Well, I believe, I love that you brought up meditation, because I believe that in that place of quieting the mind, of settling the body, that is the space, it's the space between words. It's where things happen. It's where, in poetry, you read poetry, and it's oftentimes the pauses that help to bring about the emotive elements of the words and how they string together. They help to clarify and define the poet's meaning and what they were trying to evoke in others. And that's what meditation does. It's like it concentrates the energies of the universe within our bodies, so that it's so kind of like, I guess I could describe it as, it kind of stores it for us to use later. We metabolize it, and we can draw on it at any time. And it helps us to get in touch with our intuitive nature, which is that feeling body. We are feeling beings. Feelings are energy, and we can measure them. If for those scientists that need some concrete evidence, but they can be measured. The heart, magnetic field of the heart can be measured, and I personally, that's really how I jump-started my journey of healing myself in my life, and of finding a way to put my near-death experience into words, so that I could then share it with others, to help others find that self-love, to cultivate that self-love themselves. And it was through happened. I had the inspiration from meditation for what it was that I would use, because I need a plan, because I'm very much, that kind of person where I needed to write words. I wrote words down that helped me to heal myself, and I practiced those words in my life, and that's what brought me back to me ultimately in the end.
Yeah, wow. I love that. I think that's great. It's interesting to see how you're talking about bringing it back to being you and connecting, and the message of oneness, of one love, things like that. It's so beautiful. And it's a message that I hear so often from experiences, is that that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
So through your experience, is there one key message? Is there one thing that you brought back from your experience? I know that there would have been loads of things that you brought back, lots of experience that you went through after, you recovered and got back on with life.
Mm-hmm.
But is there one key thing that overrules everything else that you experienced that you brought back with you?
That everything is love, no matter what we're talking about. And that may be hard for some people to hear, but absolutely everything harkens back to love at its very core. So that's the overarching message that I got. That was the knowledge that I received in that download. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And I know that our listeners, that some of them will be questioning, how does that work in today, where we've got so much unrest that's going on? We've got COVID still currently, as we're recording this, COVID taking a lot of time and energy in the world. How does that message of one love reflect into the way that life is right now? Do you have any insight into that?
Oh boy, that's a big question.
It's a really big question, I know.
But I will say that ultimately, for me, this has been my experience and it's my understanding. For me, everything happens because it's meant to happen exactly the way that it happens. And the suffering comes from questioning that. So when we look at things like this COVID virus, we're looking at something that we deem as unwanted. And at the same time that it's hurting people, it's also bringing people together on a scale that couldn't have been achieved in another way. It's happening perfectly. And the same thing happened with 9/11. It was a tragedy amongst tragedies, and yet it brought people together in ways that they had never been brought together before. From these bad things come beautiful things. So
Yes.
how can we judge that this is bad when this is so good? It's, again, we live in a world of opposites. We live in a world where we have the ideas of good and evil, of right and wrong. And for me, in my near-death experience, I experienced that there is no right or wrong. That's not even a concept in the afterlife. You'd have to remove that idea, the idea of judgment of right and wrong, the idea of the concepts of good and evil, and then everything is purposeful. Everything is perfect and good and right.
Yeah, that's quite a challenging concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
As you're speaking about that, I'm trying to get my head around that. But what I'm hearing so strongly from you, Krista, is that whole concept of everything is how it should be and that everything has a reason and a purpose. It's all about love. It's all about connection. Going right back to when you woke up, same as me when I woke up, everything is exactly how it's meant to be. Everything is perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Krista Gorman, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your experience with us. I know we've talked quite a lot about the after the experience part. I have a million questions, so maybe we'd get you back on for another episode. But I just want to say a huge thank you for coming on and sharing things that you've learned, sharing what you've been up to since your experience and how it all does come back to that concept of everything is how it should be. So Krista Gorman, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast show. If you've enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, tell people about it. I'd love to get these messages out there. Don't forget you can also pick up your VIP access pass for additional content at patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. You can connect with us via the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page, and I look forward to catching you for another episode soon.